Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Collage Live Online. My name is Rick Cassini-Cador, and I am the editor of Collage Magazine and the host for tonight. Collage Live Online is a virtual series of programs by Collage Institute that seeks to deepen our understanding of collage as a medium, a genre, a community, and a 21st century art movement. You know, Collage Institute in the magazine, we think a lot about artist practice, and artist practice is something we talk about a lot, usually in reference to the creation and presentation of visual art or fine artwork. But what we find is that artists often have a variety of practices. They could be teachers and therefore have a teaching practice, or they could lead activities in the community and therefore have a community practice. And today we are going to hear from collage artists who are using collage in a variety of community settings. They are leading classes for adults. They are working in summer camps with kids. They are leading art activities in senior homes or hospices, and also possibly even refugee camps. They are doing this work as artists, as advocates, and also sometimes as therapists and professionals. And in the presentations today, we are going to talk about ideas like crisis and trauma and notions of therapy and healing. And as we get into this conversation, it's important to acknowledge that in our culture, these words have both general meaning and also at times precise clinical definition. And as we talk about the healing power of art versus art as a healing technique in a clinical setting, it's important to recognize the difference. And with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Julie Vallant, who's going to kind of kick off our series of speakers today. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Hello, Julie. How are you?
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Collage Institute and Collage Live for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I am a licensed and board certified art therapist, originally from New York City, and now I'm based in Riga, Latvia, which is in the Baltic states of Eastern Europe. I am here because I was awarded a Fulbright grant to conduct art therapy research, which then led me to continuing my work with clients and with women that have experienced domestic violence. I am also a collage artist, and I am going to speak today a little bit about my practice as well as the work I do with clients in the past. Okay, so today I'm talking about collage in art therapy and how you can create a dialogue through found images. So what I'm going to go over is I'm going to define art therapy, exactly what it is, talk about the material of collage and how it's used in art therapy. Then I'm going to show some of the client artwork I've done, some projects I've done, and then I'm also going to share a little bit about my practice and the dual identity that I have as an art therapist and artist. Okay. So what is art therapy? So I think we like to talk a lot about how art is our therapy when we are artists and we are collage artists, but art therapy actually exists as a profession, which is absolutely beautiful, and art is a powerful tool for healing in that form. So the formal definition, or definition I like to use, is that art therapy is a form of psychotherapy that integrates creative arts with talk therapy to promote emotional, mental, and physical well-being. The really important thing about art therapy is that it's not focused on the product, but it's focused on the process of creating. And there's no prior art skills required in order to engage in art therapy. Within the US, it's a licensed mental health professional that requires a master's degree and over 15 plus clinical hours of training and passing a board exam in order to practice independently. Settings that you can find art therapy in are a variety from community-based, hospitals, educational schools, private practice, correctional facilities, museums, and more. So collage and art therapy. So the beautiful thing about the material of collage is that it's considered a non-threatening material in art therapy, meaning that the client does not have to focus on their artistic abilities per se, but rather they can focus on the images and the content and the things that speak to them. So, because many clients can come and feel intimidated about the process of drawing or the process of needing to come up with something abstract or immediate. And so being able to then use images to communicate and create something is really important. It can be used with most populations, and it's easy to access as a material. So in a session, the use of collage. So my background is primarily in private practice in the United States. So when I was living in New York City, I was working at a group creative arts therapy private practice. And so in session, how I would apply collage was I would structure it either through experientials or art directives, which are art activities that art therapists create around treatment goals for clients, or it would be unstructured through free association and abstract expression. So basically, whatever the client's needs were at that time. So this is just a little bit of some client artwork that I have. So this was a teenage girl that I was working with, and teens actually love collage because usually around that age, that's when their drawing skills, they sort of peak, and they maybe are a little bit more self-conscious to create art in more of a traditional form and sense. So collage can really speak. And so she was dealing with a lot of just things with identity formation and wanting to be seen and looking at herself. So as you can see within the artwork, she was able to communicate that through having a telescope lens or the eyes appearing and wanting to feel something of such. And then these collages were also about processing past experiences as well as creating vision boards for the future. So I like to also identify then, I just wrote here that collage can be a non-verbal and visceral form of art making to communicate these emotions, thoughts, and feelings that are challenging to place into words. So these clients really were able to explore themselves and create sort of a memory dialogue through the collage that they were making. And just to note, none of these individuals that have created these collages are professional collage artists. They all have come, and this material was a new material for them. Vision boards, I wanted to put this in because it's a really great example of how a really basic way collage can be used, but it's creating vision boards can really create future focused goals a lot for people that I work with. And so these are just some examples of patients and clients that I've worked with before. And then this is interesting. So this was a collaborative community thing that we had an open house, Brooklyn, where we invited people to come into our art therapy practice. And I created this big board that said, please collage this. And basically what would happen was everyone would come and take collage materials throughout the day, and they never met each other. It was just people coming throughout the day, posting things up to this board. And by the end of the day, this was the whole entire page was filled, and these are just some close-ups of what the images have. Okay. So artist, therapist, response art. So as an art therapist, I like to say that I'm an art therapist that makes art, and I'm an artist that works in mental health. That's how I like to describe myself. I started making collage before I went to graduate school for art therapy, but I really got into it during graduate school as a form of response art. So response art in art therapy is artwork created by an art therapist in order to process and practice self-care for what happens in the clinical work and what happens in their life and things like that. And so I moved to Eastern Europe about a year ago, and I started, just to example some of my collage work, I moved to Eastern Europe about a year ago to do a Fulbright research grant into art therapy, and moving to the country Latvia, I'm actually part Latvian. And so it was a lot of cultural identity and discovery for me, as well as working with people and working with patients. So I started a series called the Parts series, which was basically I would create different images and different parts essentially of people, and kind of putting them together in a way that I was kind of uncovering myself and able to release stress and really able to sort of process and have an outlet to give the time that I have been living here and really understand my own cultural identity in order to be able to work with my clients effectively. So it's been a really interesting process. It's still a process that I'm going with. And yeah, so I just really wanted to, that's my last slide. So I just really wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of art therapy, a little bit of examples of how collage is used, and about my process. So now I will hand it over to Holly. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Julia. I'm gonna share my screen and show you some of the work that I do. My name is Holly Wary, and I am a board certified art therapist and a licensed professional counselor in Louisiana. My nonprofit that I founded and run is called Whole Village Art Therapy. And the purpose of it is to provide high quality community-based art therapy services to improve access and reduce systemic barriers to mental health services, mostly in New Orleans, but we do work outside of New Orleans sometimes as needed. One of the biggest barriers is to mental health in general is stigma. So what we do is we put an emphasis on preventative care and building mentally healthy artistic communities. So we basically work anywhere from like a festival where we would make art with a lot of people to something like our very clinical trauma-focused practice with individual clients. I don't have a whole lot of client artwork. This is actually my artwork, but well, it's my artwork, and then my supervisor used my artwork to create another collage and this booklet. But this is from when I was in school and in art therapy school, and when I first fell in love with collage, and it was when I worked in a jail. And so the men that were detained in the jail that I worked at in Chicago were not allowed very many materials at all. And so we were, paper was something we could have, and glue was something that we could have as well. So it was a way for them to create using a lot of different images, like giving them basically a whole nother language in which to have their art therapy group, but not kind of over talk about like their personal life or their or things that would not be safe to talk about in that setting. So so it's just like really interesting. I mean, they weren't able to have scissors, but they taught me a whole lot of folding and tearing techniques that I was really like, it was really nice to learn that from them as well. Another reason that I really like, so anyway, the connection and accessibility of collage was just amazing to me, and how people can connect with it even if they don't have any artistic background. And it's really like not intimidating. So it's a really good way for them to be able to use art making. This is another, and we also use collage a lot when we're trying to build community in a place where people can't actually be together. So example of where this was made, it was in a mental health ward, and it was a locked ward, and a lot of the women had to be kept separate or isolated. And so by bringing these images together, it was a way to create community when they physically couldn't be together, but they could work on their own and then put it together. So, and that was like a safe way for them to be involved, which was really cool. Another cool thing about using collage in therapy, this is not therapy, this is not an image from a therapy practice, but when I was doing a professional development in Sri Lanka, these women all work together, and they don't all speak the same language. So a lot of them can't actually talk to each other. When I was doing this workshop, I had 4 translators actually, because they spoke 4 different languages, and but they were able to create something together, which was like really a powerful experience for them. There was many tears shed when this was actually created, and it was pretty amazing to watch. So I wouldn't say that you know, I would do therapy with people who I don't speak the same language as. I don't think that that is exactly a good thing to do, but in terms of bringing people together who may not speak the same language, I think, you know, collage was a really effective and powerful way to do that. Because we're in New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina happened and killed a lot of people and took a lot of things away from our community. So every year there's an anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and it's really difficult for people. And a lot of times there's other storms, like this year, Hurricane Laura happened on the anniversary of Katrina. So bringing people together around that time, you know, annually is something that we always really try to do. When we bring people together, a lot of times they don't know how they feel. And so they might connect with an image that already exists. And that is an easier way to kind of move into this healing space. And collage gives people a chance to manipulate an image to how they want things to be or how they experience things previously, and it just gives them a space to share experiences. And so especially after the first couple, like the anniversaries of Katrina closest to when Katrina happened, a lot of people brought their kids with them, saying like, I don't know what to say to my kids. I don't know how to talk to my kids about that. And so for us, we had a lot of art therapists there. We were able to be like, that's okay. We're all going to do this together. And we're going to help you. You don't always have to just take care of your kids. We will help you do that. We will help you find the words and images to talk to them today on these really hard times. And so just bringing people together around collective experiences is really important and a really good path to healing. And so we do community art making at least once a month, and it's always free and it's always open to everyone. Sometimes we do split it between adults and families, but we really try to bring as many people together as possible. And again, like the way that we do this really depends on what we're doing and what's available. But using collage really allows us to meet people where they are. And it's culturally, like if you do it correctly, it can be very culturally inclusive and accessible to people who may have neurological, physical, or developmental differences or any other kind of difference that they might, you know, need help with. Collages you can make very, very accessible, which is really, really awesome. One other like anecdotal thing I can say about bringing collage into a collective healing space is last year on World Collage Day with the in partnership with the crew of Scissors and Glue, which is Christopher's organization, we did a community art making together. And so a lot of the people from crew of his Scissors and Glue were collage artists and had a lot more artistic abilities than maybe some of the people who were at the community center who normally come to our community art making. But there was a little girl who really wanted to talk to another woman who was there making art. So she was one of the collage artists there making art. And this little girl comes up to her and just starts asking her all sorts of questions. And by the end of the evening, they were like best friends. But, you know, they have a huge age difference, a huge difference in like their background, their race, their artistic abilities, yet they were able to like spend a whole afternoon collaging together, and they probably wouldn't have ever met like outside of that space. So it's a really beautiful way to bring people together. And that's about all I have to say about that. I'm going to pass it to Hope, and we can hear from her.
Hello. Hi, I'm actually going to just, I have some slides. There we go. There we go. All right, my name is Hope Amico. I live in Portland, Oregon now, but I moved here in March. So I actually moved from New Orleans, and I was at the event that Holly was just describing. I was part of Mystic Crew of Scissors and Glue with Christopher and a lot of other people. So it was really nice to participate in that and to hear about it. I'm a letterpress printer, a collage artist, and I also teach art classes to adults and to children. I have no training as an art therapist at all. I've not studied in it, and I do not present my classes in that way. I just, I graduated college about 10 years ago and had a lot of experience working in different community groups. I worked at a bike program in New Orleans, teaching kids to fix their bikes, and so they could build bikes. And so that's what a lot of my background is, in community work. And then a little bit later, I got back to doing art and went to school for it. When I started teaching art classes, I started with adults. I had two classes. I have a drawing class called I Can't Draw, and a collage class that I call Is This Art? And the focus of the classes is about encouraging creativity, freeing people of the idea that they can't draw, that they can't make art, that art has to be important or perfect, or that everything you make has to be kept forever. And that's a overarching theme in all my classes. That's been an overarching, I've taught a lot of different things, and that is frequently my theme of my classes. I came to teaching collage because I gave an exercise in one class with my adults, and they really latched onto it. This is brought up before by Holly and also by Julia, but you don't have to use special tools. You can use what is around. You can reuse things. My class, when adults and teens get kind of stuck on an idea, I really like to do exercises to get them working a little faster. So we'll sometimes use timed exercises to just get people moving and not thinking so much about what they're doing, or just trying to do stuff and kind of get over that mental block that's keeping them from working. So I also have taught at summer art camps on and off, and most recently I taught at a 5-week intensive summer camp in New Orleans last year. I had 2 classes for collage and 2 for printmaking. So I had a group of preteens, or a group of 7 to 9-year-olds, and then a group of preteens, and there were a couple teenagers. The themes of the class, those kids weren't, especially the younger kids, weren't worried that they weren't good at stuff. They just wanted to make stuff. And so with them, we focused a lot more on how to convey different ideas through collage. So rather than just strictly illustrating something, like this was part of a book we did collaboratively. A couple students worked on this, and I think the text for this line is, "And then it got dark." And so it's about this village, and there's lots of little houses, but also like how to make things seem dark or soft or sharp, how to make composition seem watery or loud, and just kind of these like working on understanding abstract ideas through working in art, so that they're not just literally illustrating their ideas, but that they have maybe some kind of emotion attached, or trying to convey other things, create more interesting work. In all my classes, I emphasize the process over the end product. We try a lot of new materials, especially in my adult classes, and different approaches and exercises, and we try a lot of things, and then they have some time to work to see what works for them. I found that really helps me. As I said, I didn't go back to school till I was in my 30s. And I just found it's really helpful to try a bunch of stuff and see what sticks, rather than being dictated what you have to do. I am also a letterpress printer. I don't teach letterpress classes generally, for a couple of reasons, but one is that like you have to be a little more strict when teaching those. There's a really specific process. So I love teaching collage. We do a lot of exercises. This is an example of the results after one night of games and exercises with a class. I really like to do this warm-up exercise where we take a piece of paper, you glue something to it, you have a certain amount of time, and then you pass it, and everyone at the circle adds something to it. With adults, again, it's that like just trying to do something quickly and get a response and not think so much and see what happens. For the little kids, it was mostly learning not to be upset when someone glues over your piece, but they're working on sharing and releasing ownership of their work. So I think that collaboration and working together is very important in my work. I have a letterpress project called the Keep Writing subscription where I ask people questions every month and they send mail back. I participate in a lot of collaborations through the mail. I made this book with Lisa Hasegawa, who lives in Seattle. I sent her pieces of a book. She sent me back a finished book. We each worked for an hour and that's it. And again, that kind of like just getting work out and seeing what you have. I also found during the pandemic. Yep.
If you're sharing slides, we can't see them.
Oh no!
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
So sorry, everyone. Which means you're just watching me talk with my hands. So I'm glad that you guys could see that so well.
It was still really engaging. Don't worry.
Thanks. I know yeah, I can talk indefinitely, so don't worry. There you go. Sorry everyone. So now, of course, this little box is right over the thing I need to. There we go. I'm gonna click through kind of quickly so that you guys know. All right. So there I am teaching, and I did talk about collage and cut me up. I was talking to a group of print students how to alter their editions, much to their print teachers' horror. This is the work with the kids at summer camp, exercises from my class, the collaborative piece. And then, so most recently, during the pandemic, I moved right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I don't have a physical community in Portland. And then trying to stay connected to people. One thing I've been doing, I haven't been teaching, but I have been hosting a morning coffee collage. And this is one of my students from New Orleans, who's currently in Florida, showing off what they did at the end of the morning meetup. So we just work for an hour and a half in silence. We check in at the beginning, we check in at the end. And I've found it's a really nice way to kind of see what people are doing, have a little bit of accountability in your work, but then also a lot of the free time, which is my favorite, just having lots of time to experiment. So I am going to pass along to you.
Great. Hi, I'm Christine Sloan Stoddard. I am a writer, artist, filmmaker, and theater maker based in New York City. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my presentation. Ta-da! All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the collaborative collage work that I do as an artist in residence. Currently, I am the artist in residence at HeartShare Human Services of New York. This is an organization that serves adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, very wide range of disabilities. Verbal and nonverbal individuals, individuals who are 18 years old, individuals who are 90 years old, just all kinds of disabilities. And what I typically do in this setting is I will show examples of my finished work in the studio. I will work on my pieces in real time, which may or may not be collage pieces, but there's some kind of visual work, 2D, 3D, or moving image, film and video. And while I am creating, I often will have different kinds of art materials available to individuals. And we will have setups where they can make work solo, or they can make work as pairs or in small groups. So an artist in residence is an artist who's been afforded the time and the space and the budget to make art within an organization. I tend to take grant-funded opportunities at New York City nonprofits because I live in Brooklyn and I want to stay at home. Occasionally in the summertime, I will go to other organizations and work on short-term projects for whichever place has offered me the residency. So these are just a couple of pictures from Anne Marie's Sculpture Garden in Maryland. It's a Smithsonian affiliate, and I was the artist in residence there a couple summers ago. At HeartShare Human Services, they have day habilitation programs, and they have group homes and smaller apartment settings where, again, adults with all kinds of disabilities live, or they come for different recreational programs or social programs. So I'm, like I said, given studio space, materials, a budget, different compensation for my time. Sometimes it's hourly work, sometimes it's an honorarium for a specific grant. And I'm given access to resources in exchange for doing something with a population. And it's whatever population that nonprofit serves. So with HeartShare, I always start out showing different kinds of finished work and then also working on stuff in real time. So I might have a day where I decide I'm going to make different kinds of digital photography work. But the materials that I have out for the individuals will vary depending on the budget. I might have watercolors and magazines and glue sticks, acrylics, paper, canvases, etc. So I offer different options, but by far the most popular approach is for the individuals to sit together with their friends and make collages. As it's been said already, many people are threatened by drawing. I think it was Julie, the first one, who said that in high school is when many kids start to feel that they can't draw, or they doubt their art abilities, and they're just not as interested, or they're more self-conscious about drawing. But collage is more open-ended, and it allows them to work with images and objects that are already available to them. So here is an installation at the Queen's Botanical Garden, and you can see it does have a little bit of collage work in there. It's mainly found objects. There are some found images in there too. There's work that's drawn, there's some kind of sculptural work, there's junk. But this is the kind of work that I make on my own in these different kinds of community settings, while offering collage and other collaborative art making as an option for people to do. So here, the next few pictures are all images that were made in HeartShare workshops where adults decided they wanted to make collages specifically. So in this first image, I had two women use pictures from some of my old artwork, and they made a whole new collage. I just gave them different booklets, different printouts of things I had made, and this is what they decided to make together. This is more of a shadow box where I just made different things available. I personally was working on a large shadow box that day, and some of the individuals saw what I was doing, and I believe it was two men who collaborated on this shadow box. This is one of the collaborative collages done on canvas. It has mylar in it, like from balloons, birthday balloons. It has stationery, like greeting card butterflies, and magazine paper. This is a detail shot. The full piece was made by about 6 individuals working together. This collage was also made by about 5 or 6 individuals, and it has everything from chicken bones to acrylic, white acrylic on black paper, produce netting, and mylar, also from birthday balloons. This is another collaborative canvas, and it has most of the same things as the previous one, but also old computer parts. And this is another collaborative collage. These were, as you can probably tell, the ones with all the mylar, the gold, were made in the same couple sessions, because again, I put out what materials are available to me at that time. So when we receive donations or we've been given access to a space called Materials for the Arts in New York City, where different kinds of nonprofits can come and grab art materials by appointment, then we use what we have or what we are given. Yeah, so just making together and figuring stuff out together. And, you know, it's fun to show folks what I'm doing and also incorporate what they're doing in some of my own work as well. I'm going to hand it off to Stacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. So my name is Stacy Spear-Scott. I'm a collage artist. I use a lot of, I always use collage, but I also put a lot of other media in my work. But I started out as a recreation therapist, specializing in gerontology and hospice work. And currently, I teach at a small nonprofit school for K through 8th graders. So it's both ends of the spectrum. I do not consider myself either an educator or a therapist. I consider myself a teaching artist, and I do adult workshops and lots of other things. So today, tonight, I wanted to show examples of some of the projects that I've done with different groups of people and talk about a little bit about the effects that they have and how I set these projects up. It's a few examples and I'll talk about them. So I guess, Christopher, we're ready to roll. So the first 5 slides are probably projects that most of you are familiar with. And it's something I use with lots of different groups, hybridized human and animal figures. And okay, we can go to the next one. So yeah, so depending on my time constraints and on the abilities of the physical abilities and the mental abilities of the people that I'm working with, I often pre-cut the body parts, the human body parts, the animal body parts. Sometimes I do whole faces, and I pre-cut them so that people can manipulate the pieces around themselves and not get hung up on the cutting part of it, if that's a difficulty for them. Okay, we could go through these a little bit. These were done by elderly people, some of whom had dementia. And so it's actually a great thing. Collage is a great thing for them with these because sometimes there's a nonverbal situation and you can just pick and choose the parts and point to the parts and get involved in it that way rather than relying on verbalization. Okay, Christopher. If people are able and willing to paint or draw into these hybridized figures, I try to ask questions like create an environment. Where did these people come from? Where, what do they eat? Where do they live? What does it look like? And that's how these backgrounds evolve. Okay. That's another one. Now, this slide and the next one were done with geriatric nuns. And actually they were all educators. So it's quite interesting to see the stories that they told me about what they were making, because they were drawing on their knowledge of history, theology, philosophy, all of the things that they had studied, and it was quite fascinating. The next one. Okay, there are many variations of these pre-cut pieces that I do, and this one is, I cut out a lot of chairs, couches, and beds, and I give them to people and say, put it in a unusual place and place something on the couch, bed, or chair that is not normal. And if people can paint and draw, they can create the environment around it. But it's a great variation on that. And I somehow get all of these gigantic furniture collages in the mail, catalogs in the mail, and that's where I get them from. Other variations on this same project that I've used is hybridized vehicles and hybridized buildings, architecture. Okay, so the next category is what we have a lot of. And that's something I base a lot of my projects on, because budgetary constraints and just my sense of like there's so much stuff around and we should be reusing it is kind of the inspiration for this. The next two slides are of a project I happened to come with. Someone gave me a gigantic bag of wooden matchbooks. And so I gave people in my group 3 boxes of wooden matchbooks. And I said, you have to use all the matches and you have to use the box. And so it's great to see what people came up with. This is one, and the next one is a more structured, like builder type of, it satisfied the builder designer part of that person. Okay, next category is group collages. I do a lot of group collages with children and with elderly. The next one, Christopher. Okay, this is a children's collage based on a story, Willy Wonka, and they created all these candies, and then each person created a different one, and then we put them all together as one. And the next project is the same. This is a full-size David, Michelangelo's David. I did put underpants on him because I was with children, but they made all of the clothes that they could dress him with, and they collaged all those clothes, and we had a big display of that. That really worked well. Next one. So this is a spiral of faces, and I do these with elderly people where I do have pre-cut faces of different sizes, and they can sit around a large table and assemble a spiral and choose where they want it to be. It doesn't even necessarily have to be glued down. It's more the ability to sort of put it together like a puzzle, and that satisfies a kind of the process part of it. Okay, next one. What does that say? Bereavement. This is my last one. And I thought that for these times, this might be a particularly important area. We can see the slide. So the way that I would present this is that you would come to the bereavement group with one object or a part of an object of a loved one. And in this case, it's the cover of a cookbook. That red part is the cover of a cookbook. And then I would provide other found objects and pieces of paper, and people could make a collage using a piece of their loved one, their lost loved one. What happens with this, as you well imagine, is that there's a lot of storytelling and memory about the people, and sort of an homage and honoring of the lost loved one. And as I say, I think that's kind of appropriate for our time. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and I will pass the torch to Anila Babla.
Hi everyone, it's a privilege to be here. Thanks for having me, and I'm joining you today from London. I'm an art psychotherapist here, and I work both with the NHS, the National Health Service here, and with young people in a charity for young people going through kind of developmental trauma type stuff. I'm also going to attempt to share my screen, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about links between collage and trauma. So I feel kind of a little bit nervous because I sort of, I'm very kind of new to this world as an art therapist. So this talk is based on my master's thesis, and I have limited real world experience. So I hope that you'll find this kind of interesting. So I want to talk a little bit first about how I sort of encountered collage. So years ago, in my first degree, I did a sort of placement in a prison, and then later on I volunteered at the camps in Calais in France. And then a little bit after that, I kind of worked in a brain injury charity, and I just started seeing that collage was being used just prolifically in these situations where people have experienced at times really profound trauma. And I myself have used collage for years, probably since I was a teenager, so good 20 years. And my portfolio for my master's degree was like completely like collage based. So it was really interesting to me when, like in my placements, I ended up working with young people who just went straight to collage. And I think some of the other guys have talked about how probably like teenagers with their sort of self-consciousness, that's the reason they kind of go to collage. But I think that there's probably other kind of underlying reasons there as well. So I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about trauma, and then a little bit about collage, and then kind of some sort of theorized links. So, and this is kind of like very basic, so I don't want to do it like not do it justice. So what is trauma? The kind of etymology of the word trauma actually comes from Greek, and it literally means wound, which I think is quite interesting when you think of, you know, like a wound being like a cut at times, and the kind of cutting that's involved when people are using collage. And the dictionary definition is either a sort of deeply distressing experience, and in medical terms, an actual physical injury, so like a wound. And another thing that's quite interesting is that the sort of DSM-5 definition talks of actual or threatened death, serious injury or sexual violence. And I think that we also have a kind of very informal sort of use of the word trauma. And I think it's really important to think about how sort of in colloquial terms, we're also talking about things like sort of everyday trauma. So things like family issues or, you know, breakups, that kind of thing. I'm particularly interested in kind of how trauma in childhood can be reactivated in later life. And just moving on now to the sort of effects of trauma, I think, you know, if you've ever been in a situation, you probably are aware of some of these, but things like hyper alertness, so scanning the horizon for danger, aggression, feeling irritable, panic, breathlessness, experiencing a bit of that now, restlessness, problems like remembering things or the sequence of things, sadness, feeling depressed, and then somatic symptoms, so kind of, you know, disordered eating, feeling sickness, and then pain in the body. And then of course stuff like flashbacks of the trauma, or the kind of experiencing the extremes of either overexcitement or just indifference. And then this, I recently read Bessel van der Kolk's seminal kind of book recently for the second time, The Body Keeps the Score, and this quote stood out to me. It says, traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. Their bodies are constantly bombarded by visceral warning signs, and in an attempt to control these processes, they often become expert at ignoring their gut feelings, and in numbing awareness of what is played out inside, they learn to hide from themselves. And so I think, you know, in my research, I started looking at what we need to be able to work through trauma. And this is a kind of brief overview of some of those things. So being able to like moderate feelings again, to feel empowered and not a victim, to recreate connections that might have been lost with the outside world, and to move from like a very rigid state of mind to like feeling flexible and not kind of in that hyper alert state. And, you know, a restoration of safety. I won't go into detail here, but I think, you know, the stages of collage are very structured, and I think that can be something that can be very helpful when it comes to working with traumatized patients, because you know what's coming next. There aren't any like major surprises. But I think, you know, there's something there. There's something there in each of those stages that I think can help kind of rearrange and you know, I called this presentation putting the pieces back together, but kind of reassimilating when you've kind of experienced that kind of shattering from trauma. And so I talk here a little bit about the therapeutic qualities of collage. And, you know, during my time observing people making with collage, I think there was a lot of art therapy literature that looked at kind of why collage can be like easily kind of thrown together as an activity. And I think that is great, you know, like when you're working in a refugee camp or something like that, you want to be able to do really simple things. But I think there's a kind of enactment there to watch somebody tearing, you know, paper violently or cutting. I think you can kind of see that there's something more going on. So I've kind of outlined some of the therapeutic qualities here. Again, I won't kind of go through all of them in any detail because we don't have very much time here, but, you know, it gives structure. It's simple. The images speak to a level of identity with the client. There's an innate integration of elements, and trauma has this ability to kind of shatter. So it's kind of a bringing together. And, you know, art therapy in general is embodied, but, you know, I think collage is particularly tactile with the kind of moving around and the gluing down. And I think it's also significant that it uses, you know, just everyday kind of ephemera, because it can kind of give a sense of giving new meaning to stuff that might otherwise be kind of thrown away. And of course, you know, there's lots of symbolism. So, you know, it's been really hard trying to sort of condense lots of research down into something that kind of like is easy to digest. But I think hopefully you can see here that I've tried to link the kind of effect of trauma with the kind of antidote that collage can sort of provide. So trauma causes a situation where we need to kind of contain, and that's exactly what collage does. Trauma restricts our ability to sometimes be spontaneous and to play, and there's something really inherently playful about collage. And trauma is fragmenting, so you know, memory and sequential memory is affected, and I think collage is all about integrating, and in that way, like I say, it can be a real antidote to what trauma does. And I think, as anyone knows who's been through trauma, it's not, you know, it's not a linear process, and I think neither is collage. You're sort of going back and forth before you actually finally sort of stick things down, if you do at all. you know, I think there's a lot going on an unconscious level as well, because, you know, the imagery, sometimes I've worked with clients where they might not talk about things, but you can kind of see some really powerful stuff going on. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show client work because I don't have the permission, but, you know, it's really powerful stuff. And I think, you know, what really is fantastic to me is that you really see a kind of artist identity emerge, because I think, as others have said, when you're working as an art therapist, sometimes people will say to you, but I'm no good at art and I can't do it. And I think this is something that really can kind of give that sense of empowerment, which is also so needed after a traumatic experience. And I just want to end here with just some different kinds of ways that I've worked with collage, and I think some of the other guys on this call have sort of talked about some of them, but there's the kind of pre-cut collage where you're working with kind of little kits, if you like, that then people can kind of work with in a very structured way. And then I've worked in a guided way, so having a theme or a brief, if you like, to a session. But kind of most predominantly I work in a very undirected way and just let the client kind of lead the way. I think that really kind of opens up the horizon. And yeah, I think, I mean, I'm interested in trying to look at further links between trauma and collage, and, you know, maybe research into, like, qualitatively and quantitatively, how can we show that maybe it's more than an inkling that something is going on there. And that's me done. So thank you for here. Thanks for listening. I felt super nervous doing that. And I think I'm going to be handing over to Anna.
So, as I was mentioning before, I'm an humanitarian aid worker, and collage helped me to process travel and memories from life. So I started collaging 15 years ago, and as I'm passionate about travel and societies, this was the main theme of my artwork. But my work really changed in 2010. I was in Nepal to produce a documentary on child trafficking. And Nepal is a beautiful country, but a very poor one. And when I returned back home, my head was really overwhelmed by all these images of children and women and the stories that I've heard. So I decided to put them all together. And that's how I start collaging with the pictures from my travel. And I wanted to share 3 stories with you today. The first, yeah, that's what I say. I used to say that the hand stream a photograph while the mind caresses a memory. The first story I wanted to tell you is from Bali. I traveled to Bali in 2016 after resigning from my job. And one of the places that really mesmerized me was the monkey forest. So I returned back home and I had my head full of memories from this place, and I start cutting them together and slowly putting them together. And when you engage in this process, you spend a considerable amount of time of selecting the pictures from your mobile, retouching them with filters, searching for the perfect shot. And so while I was trying to create a new place, I get lost into long thoughts about life, about how we are always busy to climb stairs and to go more and more up. And the monkeys start finding a place in the paper and in my mind. And they become a new version of the monkey forest, the one I had in my mind. The second story is one of the dearest to me. I was in Haiti in 2017. I served 1 year with the United Nations mission, and it was a fantastic experience. But once again, I get back with a lot of memories, and it took me almost 1 year to process all these images. And I wanted to really recreate the image of the streets of Port-au-Prince, the traffic, the shop, the vendors, and freeze them somehow in my mind, and to recreate a bit of the space. So that became Haïti Chérie, and that's the image that I have from this long year. I like to work on big panel. I think it's, I don't know, it's like I want to extend the memory in my mind. And the last work I wanted to present you is from a nice trip I had in Cambodia just before the confinement. And once again, I stuck on the beauty of nature and the roots of nature that were absolutely devouring the temples. And I started engaging in a meditative process. And I wanted to share with you a small video about how Roots was created. So, yeah. So just to conclude, also the creation of this collage was for me a meditative exercise, and the fact of focusing on nature was really a way of not only getting out of the daily stress of work, but really to somehow get back to holidays with my mind. And I believe collage is a beautiful and mind restful activity in itself, no matter what is the material we use. But for me, the fact of using pictures from my travel or life experience as an additional unique value. And it really helped me to process memories and somehow to give them a new space. So I'm happy I could share the PowerPoint, and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Oh, it's a little dark here. But I wanted to thank everybody, and I want to bring everybody back on, and we're going to have a bit of a roundtable discussion, and we'll answer some of your questions. What I wanted to start with was, well, does anybody on the panel have a question for anybody else on the panel? Did their talk raise anything in your mind? Feel free to unmute and just go ahead and ask it. I'm going to turn a light on.
I wanted to ask Christine a question.
Go for it.
Okay.
So when you're working on your own piece and you've laid out the materials for the participants to do their own thing, are you giving input to them at the same time that you're doing yours? Is it like a back and forth, or are you?
If they want it, it's very open. Yeah, it's very open-ended because it is a day have program. Everything's recreational. There's no curriculum. There are really no guidelines I have to follow or requirements that I have to meet in terms of what anyone makes. If people ask me to demonstrate a technique, then I'm happy to do it. If they just want to, I mean, I like to circle around and see what everyone's working on, but it's very open-ended.
Cool.
So there's been some questions. I'm going to get to them. Some of you had answered questions in the chat and in the Q&A feature. I'm going to ask those questions too so that people can hear them who aren't following along in the chat. One of the questions was about the vision boards. And this was, I think, specifically for Julia, but anybody who works in vision boards can also answer. Like, what are the parameters that you give to people when they're creating vision boards? What's that process like?
Oh, sorry. So yeah, so somebody asked about the vision boards after my presentation. And so basically, I kind of stated that, so the way that I approach things is as a clinician, is I like to let the client guide the session. And if they need more structure, they need structure. And if they want things more unstructured, they can have unstructured. So with the vision board, I feel like I like to open it up to them. I really stated as a solution-focused approach that I like to use by asking the individual with free association, don't overthink, look at images, look at words that speak to you and that you might be drawn to, and then visualize your hopes and your dreams. So I'm kind of placing them in the present and the future loop. And then what happens is after they collect the images and the words and the items that they want, then together we would process the deeper meaning behind what it is we're looking at. So, yeah.
And there were a lot of questions about materials. To sort of sum it up, do you curate materials before handing them over to people? And also there were questions, what do you do if materials are scarce? Anyone can answer that.
I would like to say something about when we put materials together, we really make sure that that the materials that we have, the images that we have that culturally the people that we're working with. And so that's like super, uber important to make sure that you have that representation within the images that you have. We also, because we do work with a lot of children, we cut things out so that they're not spending the entire time reading a magazine as opposed to finding the images, and just making sure that the images are safe, like mental health wise. So if we're doing something that is focused on grief and loss, we're not going to particularly put something in there that's like really violent or that could really trigger a mental, like the opposite of what we're trying to do, right? We're not trying to open them and everything that they're doing so far that we can't contain what we're doing. Like containment is really important in this process. And so the materials that you bring will have an effect on them. So you really have to be mindful about what you're doing.
Actually, I would add that it also needs to be like age appropriate, because I remember having a lot of people give me, Cosmopolitan and that kind of thing. And, I was working with young people, adolescents, and, I didn't want to cut out all of the references to like sex and things like that, because it might have actually been something that the young person wants to talk about, but it was also making sure that it was age appropriate, because, if you're working with 11-year-olds through to 18, 19-year-olds, obviously. Depends.
And also being, aware of like, there is a lot of like magazine images with like supermodels and not like an average size family, and size meaning like the size of their body. And so I think that that's really important thing to think about too, especially if you're working with people like teenagers or people who have had an eating disorder or something like that. You really want to make sure that you represent, the people, actual humans, not supermodels.
Yeah, I love to partner with some of the universities and the public library system too to get discarded books. And of course, there are still issues with representation in books, but definitely most commercial magazines have a much narrower focus than you find in books of all kinds. So what I love about using books is that there's just a much wider variety of images. Not that I want to cut up, you know, beautiful books either, but if they're getting rid of them and no one else wants them, I'll take them.
Yeah. And I also want to comment on the presentation of materials. So all of those statements were really good. The presentation of materials as well, like sometimes if you just have piles of magazines and you're allowing someone to look through them, it can also be just very overwhelming and flooding. Whereas like if you have pre-cut images that are maybe, yes, more appropriate to the particular population or individuals that you're working with, it's less distracting and can actually allow them to connect because that pre-cut work is already done. And it's more specialized towards their goals. Yeah. Yeah.
Stacy, you're muted.
Okay, I just wanted to interject about materials, the use of textiles, because of the textural possibility with people who might be inspired to like feel different kinds of textures. And I get a lot of fabric sample books and things and cut a lot out of that and use those in collage. That's all.
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree. Secondhand clothing donations are a great collage resource. Sometimes I'll even have folks bring in clothes from home if it's something that they've talked about incorporating in their work.
And so, yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about working both with children and adults. What are some of the differences that you see in their approaches to collage and or collage as therapy from any of your perspectives? Like, do you approach it differently when you? I mean, obviously you would, but what are the elements that you include in a say a class with adults versus a class with kids? And do you like suggest any specific topics?
I would say, oh, sorry. I'm speaking over someone. I would say for adults.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Sorry. For adults, I mostly am trying to get them to not worry so much about what they're putting on. And for little kids, I was mostly trying to get them to focus a little because they just wanted to stick all the paper onto the paper in front of them. And so I wanted to give them a little more focus and prompts. And I was saying I gave more, somebody in the chat I see asked about suggested topics for little kids. And we just made a list of adjectives. They were 7 to 9-year-olds and I had them list like 30 adjectives. And then we just picked a couple of them. So every day we would do a different adjective. And it was a 45-minute class. So we'd sit and talk about all the ways to represent something round that wasn't just circles. And then we would all go make collage. But I think, and then teenagers, I feel like can kind of go, I found that teenagers I worked with didn't want to make self-portraits at all. Like that was one of our projects and they were not into it at all. But so just letting them work mostly was what worked best for me.
Someone else? Oh, go ahead.
I can speak to that just a little bit. So actually prior to becoming an art therapist, I was a teaching artist and I worked with Brooklyn Arts Council for a period of time with elementary school students. And because I actually am drawn to collage so much and because I didn't want the arts education experience for them to be so much about me making them do something versus them being able to express themselves the way that they wanted to. So what I would do is I would incorporate a little bit of art history, and this is, I'm speaking about second graders now. So that's, but I would incorporate a little bit of art history where we would kind of look at like, you know, an image of, gosh, I'm trying to think. Okay, so now we would think of like a Henry Matisse, for example. Like we would look at and we'd be like, what do you see in here? Blah, 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 blah. And then we'd be like, okay, based on these materials for today. And then we're going to create like artwork in response are inspired by this artist. And so then they would just be able to take the materials that were presented to them, think about critically and think like abstractly about this artist that they just saw, and then create art in response to however they were feeling. And so it was a way for them. I call it expressive arts. I don't think that's necessarily art therapy because I wasn't doing any processing with them about deeper things, but it was more just allowing them to have the freedom to create, to enjoy the process of creating, and to engage with each other. So I think that that was also a really good catalyst and use of collage in arts education. Yeah.
Thank you. And speaking, so since we're talking about prompts, someone asked about mining memories and trauma. Can anyone speak to specific prompts that might come up in those situations?
What was the question?
Specifically to mining memories and trauma regarding like the prompts that you might give to a client or someone that you're teaching.
I think personally, I go really, really slowly. I'd rather make a kind of much later but timelier interpretation or prompt than do something that is premature and possibly harmful to the client. So it depends what's going on in the room. And I mostly like working one-to-one, so I'm talking in that setting really. But I think, yeah, I think it's just really important to not want to sort of force healing. But at the same time, I think sometimes there are structured ways. So one of the things I mentioned kind of in my presentation was just doing like a family tree, and that can be like a way to start where it's it sheds a lot of light on the client, the way they would choose to depict that. So I think that's a sort of inroad, but it's not a potentially triggering prompt. You know, I think, you know, I guess, you know, as a therapist, you kind of really want to see kind of healing, but at the same time, in those situations, you can't force things. So you can't kind of, you know, jump the gun in that way. So I would just say go slow and be as wide and general as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good way to explain it. I would say that I would never mine for memories, period. Like it is like a journey and a process. And so it's more about helping them explore that and bringing to surface what they need to when they are ready to. Otherwise, like Anila said, it can be very, very harmful.
Just real quick, a break from the questions. People have been asking, you know, if this webinar will be shared later, if people can view the slides offline or something like that. Collage, we will eventually edit all of these events, I think after the summer sessions are done, and release them so that you can view them. But also, I'm sure people wouldn't have a problem sharing your slideshows if anyone asked. So I would say reach out to the artist specifically, and I'll encourage all of you to post your, you know, Instagram handle or your contact info or however you want people to get a hold of you in the chat here. And that way people can reach out to you later. There was a question. Let's see. Can anyone on the panel speak to the link between mindful movement and collaging? How implementing movement prior to creativity is beneficial? How might you have experienced it?
There is actually a man who leads yoga classes right before my art workshops, and there used to be dance classes as well. And there were a lot of people who would go right from one to the other. And apparently it was something that was just started in the past year or so, but people really said that they loved it, that it was a way to get them energized, to wake up, and I think loosen up too, and just be open to producing something.
Yeah, I have also been a movement teacher, and I led movement classes for artists. So in all my workshops, we take a break halfway through and do some stretches and move a little. And sometimes with the kids, we'll do a little movement if everyone's feeling really antsy or just needs to get a little out. And it's helpful. I know some kids, it's helpful if they get up and walk around to kind of think. And as adults, we're kind of have the idea ingrained with us that we can't do that. So it's nice to have everyone get up and do a little something together, even if you're deep in the middle of work, to take a little break and also take care of your wrists and your fingers and your neck.
And Carol asks, as a writer and an artist, I get the sense that there is a clear connection between memoir and collage. Would you agree? Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, I can actually. I'm going to be doing a talk later this month, actually at a photo gallery, and I'm going to be talking about phototherapy. And so I think that there is, or the use of photographs in therapeutic setting as a therapeutic tool. And so I think that there's something that is so beautiful about images that can capture memory, whether you're bringing in your own images into your artwork or you're finding images. But absolutely, I think that it can bring up so many different things. And I think that's where the powerful point of collage is with these found images, is that found images, people can relate to these things in different ways, and in ways that maybe if you were to just have to come up with some type of art off the top of your mind, the associations wouldn't be the same. So yeah, I definitely think that it can help with a lot of processing and life review for sure.
I think that's clearly what Anna's doing with her work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it really rotates about memories from my travel and life experience. And I answer into the chat. Some of the collage took me more than a year to do them. And what I do, I make a big panel and I start selecting pictures. So it can take quite a while when I have some free time, and I start placing them on the panel and cutting them and go back on my mobile. And while you look for the perfect shot, you start thinking about that person and that experience you had and the place you have seen. And sometimes I try to recreate the same atmosphere, but most of the time the images became something else. So during the process, and it's I'm surprised myself on how things evolve during the collage process. Sometimes I start with an idea and I end with something completely different. And yeah, it has become really a way of storing my memories. And yeah, so I think there's a very strong link. Something I don't know if I share in my presentation, as I mess up, so I became very stressed. For me, the digital world really gave us so many high quality images. Now we have a mobile phone that can produce high quality pictures. And it's really good to go back to them and to analyze them and go back with your mind to the experience. I think it has a very curative effect. Someone also asked in the chat the material I use. I mess up a lot with my photos before finding good material, and indeed I had to invest in printing high quality photos on high quality paper. So it's not really accessible to everybody, and it's not the cheapest way of doing collage for sure. And then I use plastic vernice over that, like I seal all the photos. Thank you.
I just, one really quick thought is that like linked to memory is that I've read a lot of journals that use collage with dementia. So that's also about, you know, kind of the sequence of memories. And I think it's just really interesting how whether it's like linked to trauma, like the definitions that dictionary definitions that I was talking about, or that kind of trauma, where memories are no longer in sequence, that collage is being used. There's something to it.
So we're a little over 90 minutes here, so I think I'm going to just do one more question. There are a lot of questions that we didn't get to, so I would encourage everyone to reach out to the panelists if you have questions still. I doubt anyone would mind talking about these things some more that they're passionate about. But taking into consideration, this is from Natalie, taking into consideration that some populations may not be able to meet in person because of the pandemic, are there ways that you're navigating virtual spaces or community engagement currently?
I guess I can speak to that about my experience as an art therapist now that the pandemic has happened. I am doing art therapy online. I do art therapy with clients remotely, and it actually, it's very strange. It is new for me, but it actually has been interesting because the collage components, when I ask them to do collage, I actually am asking them, they're in their own space, I'm actually in my own space, and we actually do mindfulness to connect with each other by doing meditation prior to the session. But anyway, with the collage aspects, I asked them to collect things around their house actually, or found objects or things like that that they can use to make the collage with. So then it actually becomes a little bit more personal. Whereas if they were to have come to my office, I would have my collage materials already there. And so that's kind of been an interesting kind of shift, I think, a little bit in my practice, at least as an art therapist. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting with, so we work with a lot of people who don't have access, wouldn't have art materials at their home. So so our immediate go-to was we created an Instagram, like a series on our Instagram called Is It an Art Material? So each art therapist took one thing that they found in their house and said, is it an art material? Surprise answer, yes, they're all art materials, but kind of went through something that everyone would have, I used the inside of a paperboard box, like cereal box, that sort of thing, but just all sorts of materials that everyone would have at their home. We also have been doing more, we've been doing some kind of bigger things as well with I think next week or next month, something, I don't know, sometime the Ogden is having a wellness, that's a museum here, the Ogden Museum of Southern Art is having a wellness day. So we'll be doing an art therapy activity but people will be in their homes. So we've done a lot of things like that. And we've also had a lot of people reach out from universities. And so we've done a lot of kind of bigger groups that we wouldn't normally do. So it's been interesting like that, but connectivity is hard sometimes, but we continue to do our community art making and everything online.
Hope has her coffee and collage, which there was a lot of interest in the chat. So I think you're going to get a bump for that event. Hope, have you been collaging during this event?
No, I've been drawing. I got these alcohol markers and they're super bright colors and I can't stop. I've been drawing with them when I have meetings like this. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, the panelists, for speaking. It's been eye-opening. It's been excellent to hear all of you talk. We have another event on Saturday, the Future of Collage, with Rick Cassini-Cador and Maxomatic, and then of course the Cat and Paste workshop is coming up next week. I'm very excited for that one. If you like this program, please visit collageinstitute.org, where you can sign up and receive updates on future programs. And if you really, really like this program, please consider becoming a member of Collage Institute to support further programs. So with that, we will sign off and say goodnight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.